Where's the drummer? You gotta get the drummer. Oh, okay. Where's the drummer?
Do you think I should move these chairs, like flip them around at all? I guess it doesn't matter. No, people would just like sit if they want. Okay. Okay. Are you good on your end? Still setting up a little bit? You good? Okay. Michael, you want to go ahead and, should I go ahead and get it started?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to get started now. Yeah, they got family. Are they a part of a group? You should help them.
Yeah, sit here.
Sure.
We don't need to sit. I don't need to sit.
Okay, guys, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay? Turn it up a little bit. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Casey Pfeiffer, and I am with the Indiana Historical Bureau. I'm the Historical Marker Program Director, and it is so great to be here with all of you today for the dedication of our newest state historical marker commemorating Gimbel's department store. The Indiana Historical Bureau is a division of the Indiana State Library, and our mission is to share the rich history of our state. Our team of historians endeavors to do this through a number of means, including our Untold Indiana blog, our Talking Hoosier History podcast, oral histories of the Indiana General Assembly, and of course through the Indiana State Historical Marker Program. Through each of these programs and initiatives, we're able to examine Indiana's past using primary source documentation and look at the changes and developments that have occurred over time and shaped the history of our state. Today's new marker is the fourth Indiana State Historical to be dedicated thus far this year, and it joins a collection of over 750 markers across the state. These have really been installed dating back to 1946 when we installed our first marker on the grounds of the Indiana State House. These markers can be spotted in 91 of our 92 counties, on courthouse grounds, city and state right-of-ways, in small towns across Indiana, along cart trails, and in front of some of our most historic buildings. In today's digital age, when we can access information on our phones and on our computers in mere seconds, some people might question the need for and relevance of historical markers, but they really do serve as snapshots and tangible reminders of our past. Though the text may be limited, even in just a few sentences, these signs help to inform and educate us about some of the people, places, events, and organizations that have helped to shape the history of our state. And they really highlight the stories that are important to the communities in which they are located. The topics covered are widespread. You can find markers across the state on the arts, science, medicine, technology, sports, agriculture, and so much more. And we see this range reflected right here in Knox County, where we have markers that commemorate everything from Red Skelton in the Pantheon Theater to William Henry Harrison, Tecumseh, and Mary Clark. Today's marker is the 11th state historical marker to be installed in Knox County. And what an addition it is. Like so many others, I grew up watching I Love Lucy reruns with my mom and dad, watching Miracle on 34th Street. And over the years, the sport has loomed so large in popular imagination, in part because it was featured or referred to in these shows and films, as well as in Bewitched, Elf, West Side Story, Mad Men, and even The Simpsons. Gimbel's was a retail giant, and it is important to remember that the chain, which gained such an immense clientele in places like Milwaukee, Philadelphia, and of course New York, had its roots right here in Vincennes. This marker shares the history and evolution of Gimbel's, from a small dry goods and clothing store that once stood here to its expansion across the country and its acquisition of other companies over the years. But this story is about more than a building or a series of buildings. It's about people. It's about Adam and Solomon Gimbel, Jewish immigrants from Bavaria who traveled to Knox County as merchants before establishing their store here in the late 1840s. Their smart decision-making, advertising, and determination helped the store flourish. Today's marker reminds us of their contributions to business, arts, and culture, and popular memory in Vincennes, in Indiana, and across the country. One of the things that makes the marker program so special is that it is public-driven. So we receive applications from the public for new marker topics every year, and it's a really, really collaborative process that takes many, many months, sometimes years. And so with that in mind, there's several people today that I'd like to recognize who were heavily involved in this process and who we wouldn't be here without. I'd like to start by acknowledging Michael Brown, the Indiana Jewish Historical Society. Michael and I have worked together now on 3 markers, and I just want to thank you so much for all of the communication back and forth. I know it's a lot, but it's great to see the final product here today, and so we appreciate all the work that the Indiana Jewish Historical Society has done to preserve these stories. I would also like to thank the Jewish American Society for Historic Preservation, the Vincennes Historical and Antiquarian Society, and the William G. Pomeroy Foundation for their help funding the marker and their support of the project. The Pomeroy Foundation is actually based out of New York, and it is committed to helping communities preserve their history. The organization generously provided us with some funding in 2022 and 2023 to assist with the creation of many new markers across the state, including this one today. And lastly, I'd also like to give a big shout out to the city of Vincennes for helping to install the marker, all their involvement in today's events, and of course, Knox County historian Dennis Latta and the Vincennes Historical Society, who have been so involved not only in this marker, but in preserving our many state markers here in the county. I know you guys have done so much in terms of surveying, cleaning, repainting markers over the years, so we really appreciate it. Dennis, I don't know if you remember this, but back in 2017, at the dedication of the Red Skelton marker, you had talked with my previous director, Chandler, about trying to do a marker for gimbals all the way back then. It's been on our wish list since then, so it's fantastic to be here today to see that project come to fruition. If you are interested in learning more about gimbals, other markers across the state, or any of our other initiatives at the Bureau, I encourage you to visit our website. You can search Indiana Historical Bureau, and there we have a listing of every marker across the state. And if you're interested in applying for new markers, IHB is currently accepting applications. The deadline to apply is July 11th. Again, today's new marker for Gimbel's department store helps return this story to the historical landscape. It reminds us of the Gimbel family, their contributions here in Vincennes and later to the nation, and how they grew their business into a retail giant that is still remembered today. For those who remember the Gimbel's family, those members who joined us here today, maybe remember the shops that existed here, and of course the iconic national chain, we hope this marker is a reminder of the impact the family and Vincennes have made on the country. And for those unfamiliar with the topic, we hope it serves as an entry point to learning more about Gimbel's roots here, and more broadly about Jewish contributions to our nation. I thank you all so much for attending today, and at this point I would like to welcome Tim Pavilion, the Senior Professor of Jewish History from Western Kentucky University, to speak.
Thank you, Casey, for the introduction. Can you hear me? Good?
Yeah.
All right. When Michael Brown first approached me about the efforts to get a marker honoring Adam Gimbel, I excitedly leapt at the opportunity. My reasoning, it was personal. As my mom and my grandma would take me to lunch at the old flagship store on Wisconsin Avenue in Milwaukee every weekend. Technically, now, by the time I was old enough to remember, the store was now a Marshall Field's. But my grandmother, being the stubborn lady that she was, refused to learn the new store name and would always call it Gimbel's with Grandma. And Gimbel's with Grandma was a weekly tradition within my family. For many Americans over a certain age, Gimbel's was not just a store. It was an institution. It was a place filled with heartfelt memories. When Adam Gimbel left the Palatinate in 1835, his legacy was by no means guaranteed. In Europe, he worked in a vineyard, and he worked as a ship hand to pay for his passage across the Atlantic, and then he worked as a dock worker when he arrived in New Orleans. It was sheer happenstance that Gimbel noticed the opportunities some immigrants found in peddling wares up and down the Mississippi River. Relying on his trademark initiative and work ethic, Gimbel headed north in the summer of 1837, nailing listings of his wares to trees along his route. Though he began with nothing more than an inventory of needles, thread, and cloth, within 5 years he earned enough to purchase a horse and carriage, allowing him to carry a wide variety of wares. Now, the growth of railroads, telegraph lines, turnpikes, and canals across the country facilitated a new kind of commerce, carried out at a faster pace, in greater volume, and over longer distances. Remote markets were drawn into the national economy, providing a boom to immigrating Jews involved in the clothing trade. Peddlers thrived by bridging the last mile between manufacturers in distant cities and remote customers in towns here like Vincennes, carrying packs with cheap merchandise from railheads and market towns to the frontier and backcountry farmers along poorly maintained rural roads. With a horse and carriage, Adam Gimbel now could venture further inland from the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, and this brought him up along the Wabash River to Vincennes in 1842. It was here that the Gimbel's legacy was born. Gimbel found immediate success in Vincennes, and which at the time was one of Indiana's busiest towns. Within a week of his arrival, he sold out his entire inventory. Now, recognizing the opportunity that was here in Vincennes, Gimbel abandoned his itinerant life and set up permanent shop here in the town. Thus, the legacy of retail in the Gimbel's family was truly born. So why are we here today? Now, most Americans will recognize the Gimbel name from Miracle on 34th Street, or more likely in this day and age, from Elf. It is important to remember that Gimbel's was the quintessential Midwestern store. In fact, their Hollywood famous location did not actually open until 15 years after Adam Gimbel's death. And their first location outside of the Midwest didn't open until 1894, 52 years after Gimbel arrived in Vincennes. Now, Adam Gimbel was part of a wider tradition of Jewish merchantry across the Midwest. Like Gimbel, the typical Jewish immigrant was far more likely to lift a peddler's pack than a ledger book during their first years in America. The first groups of Jews to enter the Midwest had immigrated from German-speaking lands, arriving in the 1850s and 1860s. Many had already lost their immigrant greenness by peddling or by clerking in mercantile establishments east of the Mississippi. Economic opportunity pulled them to the Midwest to trade with Indians for furs, to speculate in land, to open stores and small manufacturing concerns in the new river towns, and to mine for precious ores across the region, and less frequently to farm. Despite Jewish concentrations in the new urban metropolises of the Midwest, the general pattern of Jewish settlement in the region during the late 19th century was quite different from that of the East Coast, in the East Coast, Jews primarily gravitated mainly to the large cities, but here in the Midwest, a significant number of Jews lived in small towns in areas throughout the region. These towns sustained large enough main streets to support numerous Jewish stores, and many towns organized synagogues long before long. Now, smaller towns, like Vincennes, typically had one or two Jewish businesses, and the residents in search of a more established community would commute to larger regional towns nearby. Now, Adam Gimbel's store location here in Indiana allowed him to tap into the rapidly growing markets of the Great Lakes region. The population of this region boomed as German and Eastern European immigrants flocked to the Midwest's burgeoning cities. And Adam Gimbel, a German immigrant himself, was uniquely positioned to take advantage of this immigration boom. From their beginnings in Vincennes, Adam Gimbel would open a store in Danville, Illinois in 1869, before moving operations to Milwaukee in 1887. It was in Milwaukee that Gimbel's found tremendous success. Like many Midwestern cities in the 19th century, Milwaukee had a substantial German-speaking population, and Jewish peddlers canvassed the region with some frequency, and by the 1880s, in southern Wisconsin, Jewish entrepreneurs dominated the clothing and footwear manufacturing. Despite this presence in production, the majority of tailors and clothiers in the city were neither German nor were they Jewish. This dearth of German-Jewish shop owners allowed the Gimbel family to immediately thrive upon their arrival in the city. Gimbel's quickly became the preeminent department store in Wisconsin, even briefly employing future Israeli Prime Minister Golda Meir while she was a university student in Milwaukee. With widespread success in Milwaukee and his sons now grown, the Gimbels could expand beyond their Midwestern roots. Adam Gimbel's son Isaac bought the Granville Haynes store in Philadelphia in 1894 and turned it into the second Gimbel's flagship store. 15 years later, Gimbel's entered the competitive New York marketplace and became a primary rival to leading retailer Macy's. This rivalry entered into the American popular argot as "Does Gimbel's tell Macy's?" an idiom that is used to brush off any query about matters which the speaker does not wish to divulge. In 1925, Gimbel's entered the Pittsburgh market with the purchase of Kaufman and Bears, and although expansion spurred the talk of stores becoming a nationwide chain, the Great Depression would have other ideas. Still, by 1930, Gimbel's had 7 flagship stores throughout the country and was the largest department store corporation in the world. But despite their growing success, and even further success after World War II, Gimbel's did not lose its Midwestern roots. In 1962, Gimbel's acquired Milwaukee competitor Schuster's, and in that region operated stores from both chains for a while as Gimbel Schuster's before rebranding to just Gimbel's in 1869. By the 1970s, the Gimbel Brothers Inc. consisted of 53 stores throughout the country, which included 22 Gimbel's, 27 Saks Fifth Avenue stores, and 4 Saks 34th Street stores. Now, of the 22 Gimbel stores, 12 stretched across Wisconsin, with more locations in Chicago and Indianapolis and northern Indiana, although I could not actually find the exact number of stores when I was looking. But despite this, it ensures the family's legacy within our regional Jewish history and larger Midwestern history as a whole. Now, at this point, I would like to turn it over to the Indiana Jewish Historical Society president, Michael Brown, to talk about the wider Gimbel's legacy.
Thank you so much for that, Tim. I really appreciate it. And don't tell Macy's. All right. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for being here at this dedication of the Gimbel's department store here in Vincennes. My dear friends, I'm honored to stand before you today as the director of the Indiana Jewish Historical Society to join you in dedicating this new historical marker. It tells the remarkable story of the Gimbel brothers, Adam and Solomon, 2 Bavarian Jewish immigrants whose footsteps helped shape this city and American retail history. This marker might not replace what was lost when Gimbel Corner was burned down by an arsonist in 2011. Still, at least the Gimbel historical legacy in Vincennes continues with this historical marker that you see today. Over 175 years ago, the Gimbel family planted their first seeds of enterprise here in Vincennes. Adam Gimbel left a small rural Bavarian village seeking economic and social opportunities and fleeing a system that subjected its Jewish population to oppressive laws for centuries. He set out on a long, dangerous journey by sea on a wooden ship across the Atlantic to America. Adam Gimbel began with humble determination, peddling dry goods and clothing and walking the dusty roads of Indiana with care and with trust. By 1848, they established a store right here where they built something more than just a business. They built a name. The Hebrew Bible teaches us that in Proverbs, a book that Adam Gimbel read from at each board meeting to his sons. A good name is greater than riches, the Bible says. The Bible also says, a good name is more important than the finest of oils. Our sages in the Mishnah, going a bit further, teach us the crown of a good name supersedes all. The Gimbel name became synonymous with fairness, integrity, and quality, values that were not merely good for business, but were rooted in their Judaism. The idea of having a good name is more than a mere label. It is your legacy. It is what we pass on to our children that follows us in life and how we're remembered. The Gimbels understood this. Their success would eventually stretch from Indiana to Milwaukee, Philadelphia, New York, and beyond. It was not solely measured in profits or buildings, but in the trust they earned and the reputation they upheld. Jake Gimbel here in Indiana supported student athletes. He gave tuition to Vincennes University students and Indiana University students without question. He helped fund science research all over South America, valuable medical research. By the 1920s, the Gimbels had become one of the largest department chains in the United States and the entire world. acquiring Saks and Company and entering the American popular culture, as it's already been said, through movies like Miracle on 34th Street and I Love Lucy, and more recently it was mentioned in movies like Elf and the TV show The Simpsons, as we've mentioned a few times already. But we must never forget this story that began right here on our Hoosier soil. This marker, which we dedicate today, stands as a testament to the power of a good name. We owe deep gratitude to those who made this possible today, to the Vincennes Mayor's Office, and helping us with zoning and getting this marker in the ground. Your partnership means the world to us, to the Knox County Economic Development Corporation, for recognizing that history is not just about the past, it's a foundation for the future. And lastly, if the wind will allow me to continue. And to the Tim from the Riverlands Jewish Archive, whose work ensures that these stories are preserved and shared. These stories are preserved and shared. And of course, the Gimbel family, whose descendants have carried forward a proud heritage that continues to inspire the city, state, and nation. And I must share, in Indiana, we still owe the Gimbel family a chicken dinner that was promised in 1941. Unfortunately, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and this planned festive anniversary party here in Vincennes never happened. So I'm taking it upon myself to partially repay this debt of gratitude to the Gimbels in a small way. And this is a very David Letterman way of doing this. But Jeff, Nick, can you come down and bring this jar of matzo balls that we have in chicken broth, okay? And give this to the Gimbel family right now, as a partial repayment, as a token of gratitude for the chicken dinner that we never had in 1942 to celebrate the centennial. So if we can get a few pictures here. 80 years. 80. Let's not wait another 80 years, right? So and this greatly adds some schmaltz to any potential Shabbat dinner someone might have with this. This historical marker was made possible through the joint efforts of the Indiana Jewish Historical Society, the Jewish American Society for Historical Preservation, the Vincennes Historical and Antiquarian Society, the William G. Pomeroy Foundation, and together we highlight facts, dates, human stories that deserve to be seen, read, and remembered. And I want to thank Jill Weiss Simmons for her hard work in assisting us with the application process, and Jerry Klinger for his financial support and personal guidance. And thank you to Dennis Latta, who's here today, for helping us get to today and facilitating today's program. And I appreciate Richard Day's research and contributions of primary sources in the Gimbel family when we were doing research for this marker on our application. And beyond the mayor's office that helped us with zoning matters and helped us get this marker firmly planted. And I want to thank the Knox County Economic Development Corporation for providing refreshments. May this marker serve as a reminder and a reflection to all that we strive to be. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate you being here. And next I'd like to introduce Dennis Latta, Knox County historian. And Richard Day as well. Sorry about that, Richard. I didn't know if you were going to speak, if you were going to take turns, or if you were going to speak.
Well, we do. We'll
Okay. Thanks.
This is Dennis Latta over here. I think it's a miracle day, and a year ago we planned this event, and many things came to me that we couldn't have it. What a blessing it is to have all of you here today in support of this event. And Richard has some information very quickly to show you, because we're advertising now. We have a wonderful reception at the Pantheon, which is located on 428 Main Street, right over here. That way. We want you to all come over and be part of that. I'll just say it. All right. One of my the frisky wind we have today. Wish that the wind Haimatsu. One of my early incarnations was as an archivist, and I would be over at the library into the evening. I was the night guy, and one of the great
Vincennes, we were able to pinpoint exactly when he came here. They spelled his name Gimble, but that seems to happen quite often. And he was with two other guys, and I assume they were traveling in company as peddlers up and down the waters. But they got the permit, and then about a year later, in 1843, Adam was joined by his brother Solomon, who was about 22 years old at the time, and they got a joint peddler's permit. And then about a year after that, in 1845, they became merchants. They were not peddlers for very long, not like some. And they rented this building right here in the corner. Not where we're standing. No, over there where the beauty college is. Yeah, that's when they started that. I want to say that. That's the old German National Bank there now. But they were there for a number of years. And then, unfortunately, Solomon died in 1853. And his father, David Gimbel, came over from Germany and got a check, however he paid for things back then, for $4,500. So that Gimbels in 1853 were $9,000, which is a lot of money for a business in those days. Adam Gimbel, there was a big fire here in Vincennes, not the first, in 1854 that burned down about a half a block. This became the burnt district where we are now. And this was an opportunity. So Adam Gimbel bought this lot across the street from his rental property, and in 1857 built a 3-story brick building, very impressive. And then his brother-in-law, Isaac Joseph, built 2 buildings adjacent to it. So we had a string of 3 buildings there that were the Gimbels, beginning of Gimbels, or Gimbels and Joseph. Gimbel expanded, and over the years he purchased other buildings. He purchased a building over that way, where the parking lot is, and he purchased a couple of buildings. And pretty soon he owned a half a block of them. Prior to that, in his early days, they stayed in a boarding house that was about where that garage is now. So he had a rather short house in the church. It's not the house now. In 1880, it was moved, still sitting on 6th Street, across from Walgreens. And that was but that was long after he lived here. The family he apparently part of his marketing thing was to go to Philadelphia and buy out businesses that were going out of business, and he'd buy up the goods cheap and then ship them out here to the Midwest where he could sell them and make a considerable profit, get these Eastern goods of various kinds. And while he was in Philadelphia in 1847, he met Friedlin Unveiling and married her. And she may have persuaded him. She lived here in Vincennes, but they eventually decided to move back to Philadelphia, where he moved there in 1866. And he sent his sons out here. He had 7 sons.
There's a wonderful photo of him.
Yeah, which
still exists.
You'll see it if we've got. It kind of looks like a picture of the James gang. And they all kind of look that way. They're all kind of sitting there looking pretty solemn. But that was the Gimbel boys. And Jacob Gimbel, Jake was the manager. He was the number 1 guy. And we still remember that story he told. He noticed that a lot of freeloaders would hang around on the corner here of 2nd and Main. That irritated him. So he put an ad in the newspaper. What? 10 laziest men in town to stand at this corner. And that discouraged him for a while. Right. You can see that. Which you'll see also. This wind doesn't fit me, but and apparently Adam came out in 1877 for that. If you look at an enlargement of the picture, you can see some older guy with a big beard, and I think a black beard. It hadn't turned gray yet.
And it's his birthday today, by the way.
Happy birthday, Adam. But in any case, he died in Philadelphia in 1896. The Gimbels, as we said, bought a store over in Danville, and it did kind of okay. But then their big thing was Milwaukee, and that was a big city, and it was very successful. They were trying to expand here in Vincennes, and they bought the lot across the street there, where the beauty college is, and they wanted to expand the store over there, but that wasn't big enough. They wanted to buy the building across the alley from it, but they wanted the permission of the city to build a sky bridge connecting the two, kind of like that sky bridge that you can still see, I think, in Manhattan. If you look up at the old Gimbel building up there, or is that Philadelphia? Philadelphia has the sky bridge, same idea, but the city council turned him down. There was one of the Gimbels, Solomon, got into politics, and I think there was some political considerations behind turning down. So they pulled out of Vincennes in 1892, and Jacob Gimbel said the main thing was they couldn't make as much of a profit as they could at Milwaukee. But then a few years later, in 1899, a nephew of Adam Gimbel, also called Jacob Gimbel, Jake Gimbel, formed a partnership with a fellow named Hoffman and another named Gimbel, Hoffman and Bond. And they bought up this whole lot here and started the store over. So it was, we always thought of it as Gimbel.
That's a story.
They just
still remember.
They just called it Gimbel. Sometimes Gimbel Bond. We wanted to be formal about it. Jake was an interesting guy, very civic-minded. Judge Curtis Shake used to come over to visit the old French house when I was curator there, and he would tell stories. And one of them was that when he was a school teacher, a one-room school down in Monroe City, he wanted to improve himself, but he needed $200 to go to Indiana Law School, Indiana University Law School. And Jake Gimbel gave him $200, and he said, "You don't have to pay me back, but in the future, if you see a chance to help somebody out, I would like you to do that." So that was the case. The Judge Shake later won the state Supreme Court. And he was at the Nuremberg trials, trial number 10 against E.G. Farben and Company, which had a branch in Auschwitz. They tried to do that. But that was the story. Now, personally, I kind of remember the big parade of 1950. It was the Indiana Territory Centennial, 1800 1950. Sesquicentennial. And a big parade, the biggest parade ever, huge parade. And there was a Gimbel float in it, which we have a picture of. And it showed Adam Gimbel sitting out on the front porch of the Gimbel store, and I guess ready to do business. And they had the marching bands. Well, one problem was a week before, the North Koreans had come across the border, and we had the Korean War. So
seems like there was bad. Every time we tried to celebrate it, there was something that happened.
I like to think it will happen today.
A lot of potential.
But they always had a big 4th of July parade. I remember that. It was down at the end of Main Street, and all sorts of spectacular fireworks. And then at the end, there would be these sparklers, and it would light up and say Gimbels, and pinwheels going and everything. The Gimbels had the fireworks, too. Speaking of fireworks, of course, was the sad demise of the place.
Right, the great fire.
But this time it has become the old Gimbel corner. So there's the parade. There's Adam Gimbel and his float. Okay. December 11th, 1811, or 2011. A date which will live in infamy. This arsonist set fire. I remember my son had come down to visit us from California, and we drove by and said, "Oh, that's the Gimbel corner over there." And we drove there. We got to Evansville, and then they said there's a fire that's broken out in the Gimbel car. I drove back, and as I came over the White River Bridge, 17 miles from here, you could see the glow on the horizon and the billowing smoke coming up from that huge fire. It burned out the whole corner block that the Gimbel stood on, where all this grassy area was here. And we had the ruins that had to be removed, and the city participated in removing the ruins and repairing it. And they have plans to improve that building there, and then put some kind of apartments, I think, over here. I think this is the plan. That's the story. Oh, I remember coming here Christmas. Grandmother would shop, and she'd take us there. Had Santa Claus, had an escalator. Got to see the escalator. I'd ride it up and down, ride that escalator. Boy Scouts. This was the official place if you wanted to get your scouting equipment, your merit badges, and your Bobcat pin, and all that stuff. Had a hobby shop where you could buy models. I bought one of my first model airplanes. It was the Spirit of St. Louis. Back then, they weren't made out of plastic. They were made out of balsa wood and tissue paper. And then you would coat it with what we call dope, which is the dope we have now. But Gimbel's was a great place to go to for shopping. And that's my memory of Gimbel's. Dennis?
I'd like to introduce the Honorable Joseph Yoakum, the mayor of Vincennes, and I think then we're going to have the unveiling of the marker, right? Correct? Yes. And then we're going to the reception at the Pantheon at 428 Main Street. Right? 428. And if you don't go there, I will have to eat 10,000 cookies.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I want to welcome the members of the Gimbel community that joined us here today. I understand it's been 80 years since the Gimbel has been in this community, and we're excited to have you. We've got Robin Gimbel Sr., Barbara Gimbel, and John Gimbel with us. So let's recognize them. And we all know that Vincennes is very rich in history, and this is a big part of our history. The Gimbel department store started right here in Vincennes, so it's only fitting that we place this marker, and this corner will forever be Gimbel corner, ever. The only other thing is that picture of that fire they showed. Before being mayor, I was a firefighter, and most people know that. That was the last fire I fought before I went to the mayor's office, January 1, 2012. So anyway, I just think it's fitting that we recognize this space. And Dennis and he had asked me to close Main Street for this event. I didn't intend on closing it like this, but they are putting in water and sewer lines for the development of this property, which will be condominiums next to us, but then there'll be parking garages here, but also retail and apartments over on the 2nd Street side. So this will somewhat turn back to retail space starting this year. So we're really excited about that. But again, welcome to the Gimbel family, and I hope you're having a great summer.
Are we ready? Yeah. Unveiling. We will go now to the markers.
Go for it.
Yay! Woo!
Why don't one of you Gimbel
Read it
for us?
All right. Gimbel's department store. Bavarian Jewish immigrants Adam and Solomon Gimbel worked as peddlers before establishing a dry goods clothing store here by 1848. Regular advertising and quality goods drew customers, and the business prospered. The company moved to Milwaukee in 1887, expanding to Philadelphia 1894 and New York City 1910. In the 1920s, Gimbel's went public and acquired Saks and Company. Gimbel became one of the largest department stores in the U.S. by the late 1920s, with over 50 locations nationwide by the the 1960s. It appeared in the film and television shows such as Miracle on 34th Street and I Love Lucy, 1950s. Local business owners used the Gimbel name for stores here well into the 1980s, though they were separate